Hi guys, Tracy here with another scrapbooking process video. Today's layout uses the February Hip Kit and is also inspired by the watercolor class that Irite Landgraf has, and the link for that is in the information section below. I am starting with this photo. It was taken yesterday at a maple syrup shack that we went to for breakfast. It was a fairly long journey. We do this every year with our international student so that they get to see how maple syrup is made in the spring in Canada. And so I have these two photos. They're printed at 2.8 by 2.8, and then I just left the white border around them. Then this is the February Hip Kit. And I'm just pulling out anything that has that kind of purpley pink. I'm pulling aside because that's not going to go with this project. But I'm taking anything that has the more pure pink and these greeny bluey colors. So I'm just looking through the full-size papers, and I'm going to use a piece of watercolor paper as my main background, but I'm looking for some pattern papers that I can layer on top of that and behind the photo. So these are the papers that I'm picking out, and they're all from the kit. And then this is my Strathmore 12 by 12 watercolor paper pad. I just pulled out a sheet of that. And this is my Prima, I call this my All-Stars palette. It is all of my favorite from the 4 Prima palettes that I have. This one is all of my favorites, which is most of the pastel set and a few of the brights and or classics, I guess they're called, and just a few others. I do have a video, although I haven't posted it yet, where I talk about that palette and how I came up with it. And it was really from taking Irite's class that I learned which colors I like to work with, just from playing around by taking her class. So I am starting with this pink color. You saw me wet my entire sheet. I left the outside edges dry, but I wet the entire sheet with that broad brush. And now I'm taking this pink, which is my favorite color pink from Prima. It's number 40, and I'm just laying down some horizontal strokes and letting the paint just kind of wash around and move around on the paper. And then I took this other color blue, which is my other favorite color blue from Prima, and it's number 7. And I'm just laying down some horizontal stripes underneath, and now I'm taking a very light greeny blue, and it's number 44, and I'm adding some strokes at the very top. And now I'm just taking my wet broad brush and moving it around to just kind of, I guess what I was doing there was softening up the edges on the left-hand side. They were all a little bit too lined up. So watercolor, one of the things I've learned from the class that I'm taking is that watercolor, the color will move in the water and towards the water. So by adding more water and moving the brush around, it encourages the watercolor pigments to move around on the page and spread out a little bit. Then I'm just flicking some extra little drips, and I really love how it blooms when it touches the paint that's already down, and the colors are mixing and combining just a little tiny bit. Not too much, but just, you know, spreading and mixing a little bit around the edges of where the two different colors meet. So I'm setting that aside to dry, and in the meantime, I'm going to play around with my photo. I'm figuring out, I want them to look like they're just laid casually on the side of the, like beside one another. And so what I did was I kind of glued them together, as you see, and now I'm just using this little strip of scrap paper from a notebook that Moira gave me, and I'm just using that to hold them together so that they become one solid piece that I can then move around and experiment with different looks and different options. This is one of my go-to strategies for designing a layout, is to put random strips of paper, like kind of large strips, usually 3 large rectangles of paper behind them. And even though I do it a lot, it doesn't really look all that obvious when you look through my album, because they end up looking different depending on how I embellish it and how I go kind of what path I take after I've done this part of it. So I am going to start with this, and these are fairly large strips, and I'm thinking that what I can do is cut them down after my watercolor background is dry, and that way I can cut them down based on where the watercolor patterns are on my background and make them quite a bit smaller than they are to begin with. So you see that I use that trick of using a scrap paper in the back again. This is probably not acid-free paper, it's just a little notebook. So if that's a concern for you, then just be careful about what kind of paper you use as a strip to, basically it keeps all of those papers together so I can move them around as one unit, just like I did with the photo. So here we go. I just had a look at how those watercolor patterns are evolving on the page, like how they're drying, because they will dry a little less vividly than they are when they're wet. And I cut down the papers based on the size that I thought my overall design was going to end up being, and I can always add more watercolor if I need to. I'm thinking about using this really beautiful blue color. It picks up on my daughter's sweater, and I'm thinking about using that as my border around the edge of this layout. And so I'm just going to pull that piece of blue pattern paper that's behind the green piece right now and keep it out just as a reference, and so that I don't forget that that was my plan. Now that green piece of paper that those 3 chunks are sitting on top of, it looks like I'm planning for it to be my main background paper, but it's actually just holding space. I'm going to substitute it for the watercolor paper when it's dry and ready. So now I'm taking my Pentel Energel liquid gel ink pen, which gives me a really nice vivid line. It's nice and crisp and very, very black. And I'm just double outlining in a rough, quick, casual kind of a way around the edges of all 3 of those scraps of paper that I'm using as my kind of, it sort of serves as a mat. And now I'm just playing around with how it looks on my background, which is still not dry yet, so I can't actually use my background. Now, when I created that background, I was playing around with using a lighter hand than usual, because I almost always go for a really vivid, colorful look when I'm using paints or watercolors. And so I was trying, after taking the class, to kind of play around with some of the subtleties of watercolor. Subtlety is not my strong point, so I had to use restraint there. Now these Scotch tape pieces with phrases on them, this paper is from the Maggie Holmes Chasing Dreams collection, and I really, really love it. And I'm picking out a couple of phrases that work really well with this project. For those 3 background pieces, the one that's pink with large circles is also from Chasing Dreams. The one with French words on it is from Lovely Day from Dear Lizzie, and then the one with large green circles on it is from Crepe Paper's Oasis collection. So my watercolor background is dry, but I'm noticing that that lighter blue greenish color is really just not vivid enough. So, that's not what I'm doing right now, actually. First, I'm going to flick a whole bunch more splatters all over it. I basically didn't like how the splatters landed. They were too close to the edges of the paper, and they didn't really look like they were radiating out from the center of the paper. And so I just decided to add a whole lot more watercolor dribbles, just so that it looks a little bit, so that there was less of a gap between the bottom of the page where some of the dribbles were and then where the actual watercolor is. Basically, I wanted the watercolor dribbles to be connected to the watercolor itself on the background page. And you can see now that it's dry that that does leave a very subtle watercolored background effect, which is exactly what I was looking for. In the past, as I mentioned, every time I use, whether it's watercolors or gelatos or whatever, I always typically go for a really bright, colorful look. And I just wanted this to kind of fade away into the white background paper. So I really like it, but as I started to mention and then stopped a few minutes ago, this green on this side is just not vivid enough and it's just kind of getting lost. So I just added some water to the paper there, and now I'm just adding another layer of green watercolor paint, and I'm just swooshing it on, as you see, very casual. There's no, it's really quite easy to do. There's not any particular technique, and I'm just basically deepening the color there. And by adding the water first, what it does is it keeps it from having a definite edge, because if I had just watercolored onto the dry paper, it would have left an edge. And then I'm adding some more pink up at the top here because it seems like there's just not enough peeking out. So you see how I kind of added, and then I immediately add water while it's still really wet before it starts soaking into the paper, so I don't get an edge. I don't want the pink or the green or really any of it to have a crisp edge. I just want it to kind of wash away to the background. I'm just playing around with the concentration here of the pigment, so I'm adding water to lighten it and then adding more pigment to darken it, going back and forth, changing my mind a little bit. And now I'm finally finished with my watercolors. I can put them away for good now. And because a lot of that pink is see how that pink looks very obviously added after the fact, but it's going to disappear because it's going to be underneath of my photo and my paper layers. So you're only going to see the top edge that does very nicely disappear into the background the way I want it to. And it's okay, like I do like to have some edges showing where different colors overlap and where different pools have landed in terms of like just the watercolor pooling in different places. I do like that to show up. So I quite like this. It looks quite, I really like it actually. And adding that blue background paper around the border, just as I said, it really emphasizes my daughter's sweater. But then I noticed that the back side of the Scotch tape paper has a really beautiful bold pattern of stripes that is the exact same blue color that I thought I might want to use instead. I really like to add a really bold large stripe to my layouts that have mostly soft edges. I just like the contrast that gives, and this layout is going to have lots of soft edges with all those with that beautiful watercolor background. I'm playing around here with how I'm going to place these Scotch tape strips, and at first I thought I might make it into a diagonal design, and then I decided what I think I'm going to do is actually make this layout into a vertical design. And I'm going to play around a little bit with which orientation I want that striped background to go. I'm just standing up and looking at it one way and then flipping it around and looking at it the other way and just thinking about how I might want it to be. There was a little tiny bit of that scrap paper showing that I had to cut off there. So now I'm going to fussy cut these strips of Scotch tape. Basically, I cut them really roughly the first time because I wasn't sure that I was going to want to use them. So I didn't want to invest all that time in fussy cutting them if I didn't end up using them. So you will see me do lots of fussy cutting here. So some tips. I always keep my elbows on the desk when I'm fussy cutting so that it just basically gives me more control. And I keep the hand with my scissors still and move the hand with the that holds the paper. I move that around. So you see how my scissors pretty much stay in one position, and then it's the paper that moves to cut all those little jaggedy edges on the edges of the Scotch tape. Another tip is that when you're cutting a straight surface, like a straight line, it helps to do it in one closing of the scissors, which I'm actually not doing here. So I'm not, don't do what I do. But see how I'm kind of going open, close, open, close, open, close? That's not the best way to get a nice straight line. So one of the things I forgot to say when I was talking about the watercolor part is that one of the benefits of using watercolor straight from the pan, meaning not mixing, I didn't mix any colors together here. All that I did was add water to the colors that were already in my pan, like in my palette. So the benefit of that is that if I decide to go back and add some, like I actually did this twice, where I added the splatters and then I went back and I darkened some of the colors. That's really, really easy to do if you've just used the colors that are already in your palette. So that is one argument for getting yourself a big bunch, a big, large collection of colors, is that it really does make it quite a bit easier to go back and add after the fact, which is something that I often do because I can never tell as I'm designing something. I'm really a fly by the seat of your pants type of a scrapbooker. I never have an idea of what I want to do. In fact, right here, this layout, I'm really just following the watercolor pattern as my design. So because the watercolor came out in a big square, I just made my photo and my main part of the embellishments be this large rectangle in the center. So you saw me use the same gel pen there to outline the whole piece of watercolor paper. I cut off some strips before I did that so that it would be 11.5 by 11.5 so I could have a nice border. I did decide to have those stripes be showing on the top and the bottom instead of on the sides, and that's just to go along with my vertical design of this with the pieces of faux scotch tape at the top, like kind of leading your eye from the top to the bottom of this page. So I didn't really want to draw the eye out to the far left and right sides of this page. I wanted it to remain kind of mostly a top-down type of a page. So I'm thinking about using these ombre green letter stickers that came in the hip kit, but I'm actually not loving the lack of contrast that those are going to bring to the page. I thought that these gold letters would add a nice pop of not only sparkle but also contrast. Like nothing else on this page is gold yet, so I thought that it would work well, and it also works really well with the nice warm tones in the photos. These photos have been sent through, they were taken on my iPhone, but I also sent them through the instant filter on my Photos app on my computer. So I have a Mac computer, and just the generic the photo management app that comes with it is called Photos. It used to be called iPhoto, and it has a bunch of filters in there, and this is the one that I chose to use. It's called Instant, and it basically just gives the photos a bit of a washed out Polaroid old-fashioned look. So I'm fussy cutting again using those same principles, elbows on the table, and keeping my hand with the scissors stationary. And I spelt out typical and Canadian onto wax paper so that I could play around with placement. But for once, it was pretty obvious where I wanted the title to go. Usually I have to play around quite a lot with the title to figure out where it's going to go. I'm just using Stampin' Dimensionals here to add some pop to the word weekend, where it is only made out of paper and the rest of the title is made out of glittered foam letter stickers. I felt like I needed to pop it up so that it would look like it belonged as part of the title. So now these tags are from they are from Pretty Little Studio. I'm getting my studios mixed up there. Yeah, so those are from Pretty Little Studio, and they came in the kit, and I'm going to pick at first two of them because I need a home for typical and Canadian because they are getting a little bit lost in the background of between the photos and the papers that are back there. So since I pulled out two tags, I thought just to balance it off, I would add a third tag over here on this side. I just had to play a little bit around with all of the options. There's so many tags in that package of tags that there were just a whole lot of options to work with. So I experimented a little bit. Now, this tag, what I'm doing here is this tag has the word love, love, love at the bottom of it, and it's a little bit distracting. So I'm covering it up with another tag that has a similar grid pattern on it so that it looks like it's just a full grid tag, because the other ones are going to be full, like they're not going to have a lot of distracting patterns on them. So I want them all to kind of look like they're one pattern on each tag as opposed to multiple patterns on one of them. I'm really trying to decide here if I'm going to use the plain white grid tag or that pink heart tag on as my one over there on the right hand side. I want the two that have words on them to be pretty plain, so I definitely don't want the pink heart one under either of those words. But here's a great place to use a pattern, so I'm going to take advantage of that opportunity. I just trimmed it off a little bit so I didn't have to tear my layers apart too much to fit it in there. I'm using white Stampin' Up! Baker's twine to put little bows on each of my tags. That just adds a little bit of texture. I'm not going to be sewing on this project, so I want to add texture where I can. Of course, there's lots of texture in those glittered letter stickers, but this just adds a little bit more. And it softens them up a little bit too, and makes them look like real tags. I like the little bit of contrast that those really dark reinforcers give. Now, as I'm spelling out Canadian, I'm trying to squeeze it in as tight as I can because I knew that tag, I actually extended that tag a little bit when I added that extra piece of grid paper to make it a little bit longer so that it'd be more likely to fit the word Canadian. And then I just squeezed it all together because it is a fairly long word. And now I'm taking my Creative Memories trimmer and I'm just trimming down this tag because it was extending too much into the photo. I wanted more of the background to show, like I wanted more of Scott's hand to show in particular. I didn't want to cut off the edge of his hand. So now I'm going to use the same bouncing baseline for the word typical that I used for the word Canadian. So that just means I'm making these letters go up and down to make them look casual. And I'm going to trim off the end here so that it looks like the tag was made to fit with the title. I don't want too much blank space at the end of the word typical, especially where there's no blank space at the end of the word Canadian. And now I originally cut this a little bit too crooked, so I'm just straightening it up a little bit with my trimmer. And I am going to outline these, but I'm outlining them in gray instead of in the black bold gel pen that I used for around all of the other layers. Basically, outlining helps to define the shape of these tags, but I don't want it to be too bold. I don't want it to provide any, like I don't want the tag to compete with the word that's on top of the tag. So that's why I'm using a very subtle gray outline, just to give it a bit of definition, but not to draw your attention too much to it. So I really like how that pink tag looks sticking, or the pink hearted tag looks sticking out of the edges over there on the right hand side. And it does balance off quite nicely with the other two tags that are already on the page. Now, when I'm just removing the adhesive backing from all of these dimensional pieces that hold up my title and just give it a little bit of shadow and interest, and I'm placing it so that the word itself is covering up some of the awkward edges. I don't want to cover up all of the edges because I want it clear that there are paper layers underneath of the word weekend, but I just didn't want too many weird corners under the EE part of weekend. And now that my layers are all glued down, I just had to shift some of those Scotch tape pieces a little bit. At first I thought I would put a single heart right here, and I tend to be quite reserved with my embellishments on the majority of my pages. Sometimes I totally go to town and add tons and tons, but for the most part I'm pretty reserved. And my initial thought was that I would just put a little cluster of embellishments at the end of the word weekend by that tag. But then I thought, I have lots of these hearts to use, and I might as well use them. And I thought that adding a heart to each of these tag clusters here, like to make each of these tags into a cluster by adding the heart to it, really, I guess I want to say it kind of punches this layout up a level. Like it really ups the ante and makes it really clear that I have a dominant visual triangle happening on this page. It's very obvious. As soon as you look at it, boom, that triangle really hits you. And I really like that look on this page in particular. So the 3 hearts, I originally was thinking that that would be overkill, but I actually really, really like how it looks. Now, these are some buttons from the Shawne collection from American Crafts, and I forget the name of her collection this time, but it's the new one. And I'm a little hesitant to use these because the shapes, the colors that I want are large circles, and I'm hesitant to use such large circles on this layout where I already have these large hearts. But I'm going to make it work because I really want to use them. They provide such an interesting detail, and I think I like how I ended up putting them. I think that they provide, I think if I had used anything smaller along with those hearts, the hearts would have really overpowered anything else that I put beside it. So using such a large and really heavy-ish, like they're made out of wood, and then they've got epoxy in the centers. They're not light embellishments, that's for sure. So I think that they stand up nicely to the hearts. Now I'm just masking off so that I don't stamp on that background striped paper, but I'm putting a date stamp above and below, although the date, I kind of flipped it upside down and I didn't include the date on the top part. It's just, again, emphasizing that top to bottom line of the structure of this layout. I'm having a look at some of the other embellishments that came in the kit just to see if I want to add anything, but my first impression is that no, I really don't want to add anything. I have a little bit of glitter in each of the corners because I added the asterisk that goes along with the thickers, and I often do that. I often grab a little bit of a letter or a cutoff piece or an asterisk or a hashtag or something just to balance off when my title is in 2 other places. Just adding it in a 3rd place just helps. I have my journaling here. I'll grab it and read it to you. It says, going out to Sugar Moon Farm to see the maple syrup being made is a quintessential Canadian experience. And I put 2 little hearts after that. And then I'm going to continue my journaling down here at the bottom on the other side of that same stamp, so that the stamp is kind of anchoring my journaling. It says, enjoying a delicious pancake breakfast makes it so worth getting up early on a Sunday. And then I'm going to put those hearts again, those 2 hand-drawn hearts. There we go. And putting an asterisk beside the beginning of each of those bits of journaling. And I'm looking at this and looking at it, and I'm really not liking it. What I'm not liking is that gap that we have between the 2 bits of Scotch tape on the top and the bottom. I'm adding more journaling. Here it says, the maple pecans are the best thing on the menu, although Liv loves the hot chocolate. And I'm adding another 2 hearts there, hand-drawn hearts, and an asterisk at the front of that one. And then I'll put more, I'm kind of trying to take a balanced approach here, journaling on the top in 2 different places and journaling on the bottom in 2 equivalent different places. So I'm going to place it right under the word Canadian there. I'm thinking about that because it's really, this is really accentuating that gap that I didn't like to begin with. So as I do it, I'm thinking this is causing a problem here. But I just had more to say, so I wanted to write more. So it says, this year we picked up Jen on the way, and then more of those hearts. And now that I've added all of this journaling, those 2 gaps become all the more obvious. I'm going to shift the Scotch tape around a little bit to see if that can close the gap a little, but I can't stop noticing it. So I'm going to have to come up with some type of a design strategy. I thought about maybe doodling, but I'm not feeling confident in my doodling skills. I thought about jotting some more journaling, but I thought it would look a little bit too contrived, or I don't know. I'm finished. Like I don't really have anything else to say. So I didn't want to journal for the sake of journaling. So I grabbed, this is a perfect time to grab these phrase roller stamps when you want to add more journaling, but you don't have anything else to say. So these, I have an Amy Tangerine one and I have a Shawne one, and they just say random things. And I have those 2 cards over there. I really only needed 1 because I could have stamped on either side of 1 card, but I didn't realize that when I was doing it. When I first bought them, I just stamped them onto those cards, and now I know what's on each of them. So it just makes it easier for me to find the phrases that I'm looking for. And I'm choosing phrases that go along with my journaling. So it says like somewhere lovely, always remember, go somewhere lovely, get away from it all, what a day, see the world. Yeah, I think that's all that I chose. And I'm using my new favorite neutral ink, which is Lawn Fawn Fundamentals Premium Dye Ink Pad, and the color is called Narwhal. And it is a really beautiful, I'm going to call it a grayish because it's gray, but it is a really, really warm gray. It has almost it has an almost browny, greeny, gray look to it, like very warm and beautiful. And it coordinates quite nicely with that Chamel pen that I did my gray outlining and journaling in. And I did my journaling in gray this time because I didn't want it to be as bold as it would have been if I did it in black. So the black is really confined to the outside edges and then the outside edges of my layers of paper as well on this one. And sometimes using just a touch of black can really help it do its work a little bit better, and its work meaning defining things. So here are the close-ups, and I do have some photos at the end. This will probably be the last process video that I do for at least a week. I'm going to be taking a bit of a hiatus this week while I head off to Moncton to attend Crop and Create, which is a large scrapbooking crop get-together that is put on by Scrapbooking Cards Today magazine. And I always meet up with lots of friends there. I travel with a friend, and then I always meet lots of people there, old and new friends. So I'm really looking forward to getting away and having just a girls' weekend of scrapbooking and having fun and eating good food. So this will be the last one from me for a while because this week I have to go to work and pack and prepare for the trip. You might see one more packing video from me because I've received a lot of requests from people wanting to see what I'm going to pack this year. So I might get a chance to post that by Thursday. If not, I'll catch you on the other side of Crop and Create. If you follow me on social media, look for lots of posts from me from the event. And take care and have a really great scrappy week.